Hey Grandmasters, it's Mike from the WCA with the Week 4 update. In front of you is a position that Rusa and I used to teach kids around 2010 or so, the notes say. So this is about 3 years ago, and we used to use this position for our 4 o'clock class, and it's what we call a dual position. It's a kind of position where we would sometimes have black to move and other times have white to move. And it kind of fits into what we did last week in terms of structure, because if you take a look at this for a moment, let me change the screen. This was the final position from the video that we showed last week in week 3. And this was the conclusion to the Grandmaster game that we looked at. And you'll notice here, I'll use the mouse pointer, that this triangle of pawns is really what got black into trouble because of all these weak dark squares. So this position here with white to move is actually mate in 3, and it happens to be one of the answers from the puzzles that we gave in this very update. So if you're watching this video and you couldn't figure out the answer, you can go back and fill it in now. The checkmate from this position was queen takes on h7, king takes back. That's forced because if you don't take that back, you're going to have to put your king here, and then the queen checkmates you in just one move. So taking the queen is forced, but then a very simple checkmate. Rook h4, king back to g8, and mate. Now, the reason why we spend a lot of time on these positions, it's not that they're really that difficult. They're not. At first, for a new player, it's not easy to sacrifice your queen, but I'm going to share a little secret with you that strong players do in positions like this. What a strong player will do, because their pattern recognition is so good, they're going to pick things out in this position that makes sense to them, so that as soon as they see these pawns here all on light squares, something kind of triggers in their mind to say, hey, I've seen these positions before. The dark squares are so weak. Can I get at those squares? And then they start imagining in their mind one of their pieces landing on that square or one of those squares forming a checkmate. So here, if you could just imagine this rook flying over all these pieces and making a right turn and landing on h8, you have a checkmate pattern, right? That black king is stuck inside the box that I'm highlighting here for you, and it's mate. So all you have to do is figure out, well, why can't I get there in one move? Well, that's easy. The rook can't legally jump over this stuff. And 2, well, if I can't get there in one move, well, how do I break down black's defense? And with a little bit of prodding yourself, it's not that hard to find out that the queen just takes the pawn, and there's no defense to the upcoming checkmate. Another thing to look for when you're solving one of these is remember that your opponent gets to move too. Here it's easy because white's moves are forced, but there's another little signal that you can look for. The black pieces are completely cut off. If you look at your bishop here on f6, these two pawns in this position, not the pawns, I'm sorry, this pawn here and this bishop in this position create this kind of wedge. Since this pawn can't move, that prevents the queen here on c7 from sliding over to defend her king. If these two pieces stay in that position, it's pretty much impossible for the entire black army to get over and defend the king. So let's just put 2 things in our mind, and there are several more that you'll learn at the WCA and in other places, but just 2 little hints to remember if you think there's a tactic in a position. 1, are there lots of weak squares in the zone that I'm attacking? Ask yourself that question, and here it's pretty obvious the answer is yes. And then 2, always remember your opponent is just not going to stand there and let you checkmate them. They have defensive ideas. Here, if you examine this position closely enough, you'll come to realize there's no defense to this, and you'll begin to start naturally looking for attacking moves, even sacrificing a whole queen as we did in this position. Okay? So again, let's compare that to the position from this week's lecture. In this position, we have the same exact pawn structure, same exact structure as in the other position. And I'll flash that up for you one more time so you can see. Let's back that queen out of there. This is what you started with, right? Pawns on h7, g6, and f7. Now let's go to this week's video, and you'll see the pawn on h7, g6, and f7. For now, we're going to work on it being white to move. There's a lot of good stuff in this video. If we did black to move, we'll do some of that in class. But for you guys, just to learn the ideas again, let's cover what we just talked about. One, as white in this position, are we looking at a black king that has weak squares around his position? And the answer again is yes. Because all of the pawns are on light squares, the dark squares have to be weak. Although this position is a little bit different. There is no wedge here. This piece belongs to black, which means it can move anytime it pleases, and most likely will move to a position where he can defend some of these squares in this zone where the king is being attacked. But since the pawns are on the light squares, the fact remains the dark squares don't have any pawn control. So if we can overpower black with the pieces, there's a great chance that you will succeed, either mating the king or forcing black to give up a lot of material to stop your attack. Okay, so next, visualize a mating pattern in your head, even if it's silly. If we could get a rook to the square, like in last game, and if this bishop here were a knight instead of a bishop, and you had a white rook, I don't know how that would happen in real life, but or a queen or any other piece that was protected, you would have a checkmate. Well, that doesn't work here. It just, none of that makes sense, and it should actually appear silly to you. But go further. Find another pattern. How about a queen here on this square? If there was no black queen and no black rook, that queen could land here and you would have a checkmate. The king has no way out of this. So that doesn't seem to work. And again, it seems silly. One that does work, however, or at least it comes a lot closer to working, is if the queen took this bishop. If the queen were on f6 and it were her turn, you have checkmate in one move. And that looks nice because this square is where the white queen could create a mate. Does it work now in this position? Well, keep answering the questions and then asking your own questions. It doesn't work because to get here, to get to g7, we have to come here first. We have to take this bishop. Well, what's the problem with that? The black queen is there. She's going to take you. If the black queen wasn't there, you could take the bishop and there would be no defense to the checkmate. Once you start getting those ideas into your head, these tactics become pretty simple. How can we get the queen away from the defense of the bishop? Pause your video and find the right move. Okay, I hope you found in this position the move rook d7. It's an awesome move. It not only hits the queen, but it hits the bishop here on b7, which is another thing that players focus on, and you've all heard it in the class. Loose pieces, pieces that are not defended. Well, at the beginning of the position, if I back it up a move, the bishop is defended. It's defended by the queen. But when you play the move rook d7, the bishop has a problem. If the queen stays there, the rook's going to take it. If the queen moves, she can't defend the bishop on b7. So what happened in the game that this was played from, when we went through our notes, remember these were WCA students who had this position in front of them. The student playing the black pieces realized there was no way to save the queen and both bishops, so they played the move queen e5, which kind of makes sense. It you're keeping an eye on the piece that will save the checkmate. And then the game we examined, our student just took the bishop on b7 and ended up winning from this position with an extra piece. I want to share something with you quickly, though. One of the other players in the class at the time did find the right move. which was rook to d7, but their opponent with black played something different here. They actually took the pawn on b2. I'm sorry, not here. One moment. Here. They took this pawn on b2, just allowing white to take the queen, and there would be a big material shift. This is still winning for white, but it turned out that white in this position, instead of taking the black queen, found a stronger move and played the move rook a to d1. And that's a really cool move, because by not taking the black queen, you bring your last piece into the attack, and all of the problems that black had are pretty much still on the board. This bishop is still being attacked. The queen is still being attacked. And let me put a highlight on here. You'll notice now the queen and the rook on d7, without this bishop being here, create another mating threat. So in this position, what does black do? There are all sorts of problems here. The player in this game decided to try to bail out with a queen trade, and white just went into this very forcing line. Took, and then played the move c5, which was just awesome, because back here, if you go back, there's a bishop hanging on this square, I mean, that you can just take. But by playing the move c5, you leave the bishop attacked up here, but at the same time you bring this bishop into the battle, which is going to put a ton of pressure on this square over here. Black tried to defend both by lifting the rook up, and then a really nice combination by white. Rook d8 check. Rook has to go back to block, trading the pair of rooks off. And then rook d7, renewing the threat to the f7 square, renewing the threat to the bishop. There really isn't much of a defense to this. You can't lift the rook again this time, because you'll get checkmated back here. So black tried to run away with the bishop, but they just kind of lost very quickly here. Bishop takes pawn check, king h8 only move, and then bishop took the rook on e8. So an interesting try by black, but that was still losing. But what was real impressive was the way that white didn't rush to take the queen. Okay, so coming back to our move here, the original move, rook to d7, the main game that we looked at was after queen e5. Black just took the bishop straight away, and this pawn was being attacked here. I mean, black's position is really a mess, but there are still some problems here. You, aside from being down material, it's very difficult to get rid of this bishop. So if you try to put your bishop in there to trade it off, you get mated. And a good time to stop the video and see if you can find a forced mate for white. Okay, so queen f7 check. King has to go to h8, and then simply bishop takes g7. The only move is for this queen to take, and you recapture with your queen and you have a mate. Okay, so after the move c5, white came up with the idea of bishop a4. And it wasn't just to put pressure and attack this rook. It was designed to eventually kind of come in on these light squares and then post itself in the center onto d5. And black took on b2, hitting the rook. So you don't want to take this guy up here yet, because then the queen will take this with check. White simply moved the rook to the open file. Black took his rook out of danger, and then queen d5. And after queen d5, black pretty much has to call it quits. There's just too much pressure on this f7 square, and plus being down a piece, it's over. However, interesting moment here. Black didn't resign. I know it was just a WCA game and not a tournament game, but I want to caution you that being up a piece in a position that's overwhelming like this, it's not enough. You have to always keep your concentration level up and be very careful not to fall for any tricks. I would definitely recommend that you guys never resign these positions, no matter how bad they are. In this position particularly, I know it's terrible for black, but you'll notice the white king has an escape square here on h2, and there is a dark squared bishop that someday could eventually get to this diagonal. There is a queen that's already attacking the back rank for white. Now I know that the odds of this rook moving out of the way and this bishop coming to the square, it's almost impossible. But keep in mind, your opponent, when they're losing, they're going to start playing for tricks like that. So please don't ever let your guard down. It's very, very important. Okay, so this game concluded with the move rook f8, just trying to hold that f7 square. And it's really, really, really bad here. It's tough. But after that move, I made this little highlight for you. And you'll see that this rook up here in the corner is now being eyed by the queen. Now that's important because these kinds of positions is where a lot of students mess up. You have a totally winning game, but you're not exactly sure how to put it away. Well, start to pick up these little clues. If this rook loses the protection of this rook, it can be taken for free. Now, you could grab this for free. That would be fine, but watch the way white concluded this game. First, they played rook f7, and that would set up just an incredibly strong discovered check. So black pretty much had to take this rook. But you'll see here, the queen is directly eyeing the rook on a8. It's a really nice finishing move. So after rook takes f7, what does black do? Taking this rook leads to queen a8 check, and it's curtains. The only way is to reblock with the rook. Queen will take the rook, and that's very similar to the pattern we saw in last game, except it was reversed. The bishop was here and the rook was here, but you see that they're trapped in the same box here. Okay, so after rook f7, the only move was to play king h8, and then a very simple wrap-up. Just take, black took, check, king g7, queen f7 check. This is all forced. You can check it yourself. King went to h6, sorry. And it's in this position where I want you to examine one more time this. All these green squares on the back line here on white's first rank represent squares where the black queen, she could land on those squares and check that king. If this rook were not on the back rank, this other highlighted square would be the only escape route. There's a bishop on the board that could cover that square. And these ideas are known as cheapos in chess. And that's right, the word cheap in chess basically means, oh man, I can't believe you got away with that. I was totally winning and you just tricked me. It's true, this is a really cheap idea, but remember, I will tell you over and over again, your opponents become really tricky when they're losing like this. They don't have a choice. They're not going to play moves that are necessarily good, but they are going to play moves that are tricky, and they're just going to take a chance that you put your guard down and say, hey, you know, look at this, I'm totally winning. I'm up 2 rooks, and, you know, how could I possibly lose this? Please don't let your guard down. So what white did here, because there was enough time on the clock, is they remembered this. And how do we know that? Is because we go over these games with the students and they share it with us. He remembered that I know my opponent is going to try to play for tricks, but fortunately I have time to set up this devastating attack and I don't have to worry about his tricks, because 1, my rook is guarding all these key squares, and 2, it's protected by another piece. So by the time this queen tried to eliminate this bishop, there is no way that black, this king, is going to survive this attack. And that's what gave white time to play this really cute move, rook h8. And it looks like a blunder. It looks like a blunder because you can just take that that rook for free, which black did blid. It's like, why not? Hey, I can just take a free rook. But with the bishop here on this square, it has the ability to block on this line, and it doesn't work now because of queen f4 check. And now the black king is forced to go up. Can't come down because you have checkmate in one move here, right? So you don't want to come to this square. You guys should all see mate in one. That's pretty easy to see. So after queen f4 check, king g7 is forced, and now the rook can leave the back rank because it's check, and you just follow through with rook d7 check, king g8, and mate in one, queen f7. Okay, so we're going to conclude the video here, but what I'd like you to do, if you have time, here's the beginning position. White's first move, again, here was rook d7, deflecting the king away from this bishop. Go through it again. Take a little time and make sure that you see all the mating patterns, and try to remember some of the ideas you heard in the video. Okay? We'll see you guys on Sunday.